When I think of Seven, I think of one of the few films in cinematic history that has only grown more relevant and more profound as time has gone on. A film that managed to capture such an important and fundamental truth of human nature that its wisdom and insight on civilization has only become more and more enhanced. When I think of Seven, I think of the ever-growing disintegration of society. For those that haven't yet watched Seven, the plot is essentially about Detective David Mills, played by Brad Pitt, and Detective Somerset, played by Morgan Freeman, investigating a series of gruesome murders that mimic the biblical seven deadly sins. However, at its core, Seven is an exploration of the decay of morality and the differing ideologies of young versus old. In the first act, we meet William Somerset, a detective working in one of the most crime-ridden cities in the country, who plans on retiring the following week. We're then introduced to David Mills, a young, bright-eyed, and bushy-tailed transfer detective who gets assigned to be Somerset's partner during his final week of active duty. And with establishing these two leads, what the film is really doing is establishing two opposing perspectives. Morgan Freeman, someone who's old and tired and otherwise exhausted from the overbearing sickness of society, and Brad Pitt, someone who has yet to see everything that the world has to offer, someone who's eager to make a difference, who still holds out hope for a better tomorrow. And this clashing sense of perspective and ideology will come to define the rest of the film. Every conversation they have, every disagreement they encounter, it's all motivated from an attitude of hunger and fatigue. As the film goes on, Mills and Somerset start encountering and investigating the horrifying murders inspired by the seven deadly sins. And as the two fall deeper into the twisted mind of our unnamed killer, we arrive at one of my favorite scenes of the whole film, a simple conversation between Mills and Somerset at a bar. In this scene, we start to gain a bit more insight into the emotional constitution of our two leads and how each are reacting to the madness that they're witnessing. Brad Pitt representing hope for a better tomorrow, and Morgan Freeman representing broken aspiration. As we explore further into the very nature of evil, a question starts to arise. Can hope exist in such a morally distraught world?
You can.
You wanna know? Damn right.
And you're gonna make a difference.
Whatever. The point is that I don't think you're quitting because you believe these things you say. I don't. I think you wanna believe them because you're quitting. You want me to agree with you and you want me to say, yeah, you're right, it's all fucked up, it's a fucking mess, we should all go live in a fucking log cabin. But I won't. I won't say that. I don't agree with you. I do not. I can't.
And as we enter into the final act, our two main characters become surrogates for the film's thematic question: what will prevail, hope or apathy? Eventually, our unnamed killer finally reveals himself to Mills and Somerset.
Detective!
You're looking for me.
Hey!
What's your fucking move?
Turning himself in on the condition that they drive him in custody to the location of the final two bodies. And in perhaps my favorite 10 minutes of the whole film, we experience another conversation between Detective Mills, Detective Somerset, and our killer, John Doe. I find this scene so enthralling because the way in which Somerset and Mills both address John Doe is exceptionally well written. During this scene, John Doe is explaining a majority of his motivation for doing what he does, being that the world is falling deeper to the sickness of sin more and more every day, and he can no longer stomach to watch such a rise in filth and mayhem. He explains that he is merely a byproduct of the world, a reaction to the prevailing sense of transgression and revulsion. Now, the way in which Mills speaks to John is with a great sense of anger and frustration, someone who's only sickened by what he hears and wants nothing more than for John to just shut his mouth. Somerset, on the other hand, speaks to John with a sense of patience and caution. He asks him questions and responds with attentiveness, because on some sort of level, he understands exactly where John Doe is coming from, because both he and John are members of a former society that no longer exists. Both grew up in one world and are now living in another. Both have watched society disintegrate and crumble, and both have responded with broken hope and horror. Mills can never understand the mindset of John because he grew up in an already broken world. He's accustomed to the rubble, but both John and Somerset remember what once was. They watched it fall.
We see a deadly sin on every street corner, in every home, and we tolerate it. We tolerate it because it's common. It's trivial. We tolerate it morning, noon, and night. Well, not anymore. I'm setting the example. And what I've done is going to be puzzled over and studied and followed.
And in the tail end of the third act, they arrive at their destination and a certain box arrives. And for those that haven't seen the film yet, I won't spoil what's inside, but for those who have, you know exactly what happens next. And Mills must decide whether or not he wants to kill John Doe and become the final deadly sin, wrath. If he does, John will be dead, thus concluding the deadly sin of envy, but Mills' life will be forever gone, most likely disbarred from the police force and going to prison. And in this scene, our film's thematic question is brought to its inevitable conclusion. Can hope exist in a world so shrouded in darkness? Will Mills hold out hope for a better tomorrow, or will he resort to falling into despair? And in one of my favorite moments in cinematic history, hope dies. And in the film's final moments, we see Mills being escorted away in the back of a police car, and Somerset speaks to the audience one last time.
Ernest Hemingway once wrote, "The world is a fine place and worth fighting for." I agree with the second part.
The world is no longer what he once knew. Darkness has prevailed, and there is no going back. As time has gone on, this film, in my mind, has only become more relevant and more true. Even since the film's release, the world has only progressively become a more scary place to live in. According to the CDC, suicide rates worldwide have increased 33% from 1999 to 2019. According to Science Direct, depression rates have increased by 49.86% from 1990 to 2017. According to the FBI, violent homicides have increased by 25% from 2019 to 2020 alone. And according to the World Health Organization, worldwide obesity has nearly tripled since 1975. We're moving in a direction riddled with shadow and gloom. I think David Fincher saw it happening back in 1995, and since then his thesis has only become more relevant to our culture.